will now move into our next segment, which is Let's Talk Health Perspective from the IRDAi, which will be a one-on-one discussion with our member non-life, Mr. P.J. Joseph, and the session will be anchored by Dr. Narottam Puri.
Thank you, FICCI, for once again giving me this opportunity of talking to a dignitary from the health insurance sector. My knowledge of the health insurance sector has actually increased in the last 9 years since FICCI started contributing to this sector, and my involvement with the health insurance sector otherwise has been more as a physician at the other end of the spectrum, mostly from the provider point rather than from the insurer point. But I think it's the amalgamation of the entire piece of the consumer, the provider, and the payer that has resulted in the growth of the health insurance sector that we are seeing today. I still remember the days not too far ago when the provider and the insurer and also the TPA weren't even on talking terms. I mean, it was rare for them to share the same table. So we've come a long way, and it's indeed a great pleasure to welcome today Mr. P.J. Joseph, who is an industry veteran who spent his entire career in the health insurance sector, or rather in the insurance sector, and is now the person who is someone that we all in the provider as well as payer category will be looking at very closely and very hopefully, with help coming through his vast experience. He's been in New India Assurance Company for nearly 30 years, in the United Insurance Company, the agricultural insurance sector, and now as the non-life member of IRDAi, he is in the enviable position of not only just answering some of the queries that the insurance sector might have in the health sector, but also in giving direction towards the resolution of some of the disputes that are there. From the perspective of understanding, I don't think there is a better person to give us an overview of just what the non-life sector is. So I'm going to ask a very general question so that we get cracking, to basically understand that your recent role, you only joined in March as a non-life member, your recent role, what does it require you to do in the entire non-life segment? Particularly from the perspective of health, we'll come to.
It's a very short question, but the answer will be quite long if I explain. As you're aware, a non-life sector covers all lines of business other than life insurance. And there are several lines of business within general insurance. And the companies doing general insurance business, which includes health, and there are companies which are doing only health and other specialized insurers like agriculture and export credit guarantee insurance. So all this is under the purview of non-life. When it comes to registration of companies, when it comes to approval of products, when it comes to ensuring that the governance standards are being maintained, all this comes under the purview of non-life insurance sector.
Within the non-life health insurance segment, how important has been the growth of the health insurance piece?
This is the fastest growing segment in general insurance or non-life insurance, except probably crop insurance in the current year because of particular reasons. So this is the non-life line of business which has been growing, and there are various reasons why it is growing at a fast pace. And one is that the penetration is low, so there is a huge unmet demand which is being met, plus as Chairman mentioned, the government schemes that are in vogue, the corporates coming to buy group insurance. So for various reasons, it has been growing at a much faster pace than other lines of business.
But I'm quite sure, not just as an insurance provider, but or a regulator now, But also as an Indian, you must be pretty disappointed at the total volume of insurance that's there. Say about 20,000 crore out of say 400,000 crore health spend.
Right.
So how do you view that?
You have to see it in the context of the general penetration of insurance in this country. It is much lower than what is in the rest of the world. You also have to look at the capability of people to pay premiums. It is not enough that you have the willingness to buy, but you should all have the means to buy insurance. So with a large section of the population living below the poverty line, there is a challenge. That's where the government schemes come into play. So while I'm not patting myself on the back for having done so much, there is a lot to be done. The fact that it is only so low indicates that there is a great opportunity for all these stakeholders, the insurers, the TPAs and other the healthcare providers, including the regulator, to work towards increasing that penetration.
But one thing which has often confused me, I know you're absolutely right in saying that those who can't afford to pay, how will they pay? But those who can pay, don't pay. Is that because of what? I mean, have we not advertised this enough? Is the educational quotient about health low in this country? I mean, I don't know how many of people in this hall themselves may be carrying health insurance, but if you were to go to a similar gathering of non-insurance people and just ask people to raise their hands, and I often do that in medical conferences, it's strange that even doctors don't get insured.
Sure. So you have touched an important area, concern. The awareness levels are low, in spite of the fact that the companies are doing a lot of advertisement. Plus, the government schemes are popularizing the health insurance. Yet, it is not enough that people who can afford to buy insurance are not coming forward to buy. So, I don't know what could be the reason, because they still believe that they will not fall sick, they will not need hospitalization, or they believe that the family support system will take care of in the case of an emergency. But yes, we have to make a dent in that kind of belief in the people that they don't need insurance, and that's the challenge for the insurers.
Is that also a challenge for you in your current role? Because IRDA stands for regulation, and you're both the developer and the regulator. Now, to some, it might appear as a conflict of interest or contradictory. But how do you view this, and how do you settle the role definition of both being a regulator as well as a developer of insurance in this country?
There's no contradictory role. I think we are supporting each other. There's a question of a lot of dialogue with the industry and the regulator to ensure that the sector develops further. And the idea is to create a facilitative framework for the industry to thrive in this situation. As a regulator, we do take initiative in creating awareness. We have allocated a budget for having awareness programs in the various parts of the country. But what is happening is that that's not enough. There is a need to put in much more effort, and I think all the stakeholders have to understand that it is not enough that only one segment or one company does the awareness campaigns across, including various opinion makers in the society, to convince the public that there's a need, and this, if a large number of people buy insurance, then it will become more affordable, and therefore the penetration will go up further.
It just from the answer that you gave, a thought occurred to me. Utilizing public figures who have stature, being utilized by the health insurance industry to advertise, is something that that is being used by other industry. In fact, the Consumer Affairs Department of the Government of India also uses that Jago Grahak Jago. But I've never seen an ad which tells a Jago Grahak Jago, buy your insurance. So I somehow feel that that's something that is lacking. I think the health insurance industry, the providers and the payers both need to get together to educate this way. Would you agree with that?
I don't know if it is the Indian society as such. When it comes to insurance, where it is life insurance, you don't want to bring to the notice that there'll be a death in the family, and then insurance comes into play. Somebody will fall sick, and then insurance will come into play. So probably you have to find novel ways of communicating to the public that, okay, there is an eventuality, which will cost you not only your head, but also cost you a lot of money, and therefore there is a need to have insurance. Well, I am not an advertising guy, but I am sure those people who are familiar with how to communicate will find ways and means of communicating without triggering that kind of negative emotions in the minds of the people.
Recently, a lot of advertisements have come in which, and earlier in the world, I remember the medical industry has more like a CSR activity, utilized some sung heroes and some unsung heroes to create a message. Because the messaging that, let us say, a Sachin Tendulkar might say about buying a health insurance is definitely more than anybody else saying the same thing. But changing tax, there have been a large number of changes in the last decade that have come in the health sector, not just from the provider point of view, but in the insurance sector too. IRDAi has been very proactive in bringing in new health insurance regulations. So how do you see the impact of these new how do you see the impact of these new regulations unfold over the next few years?
Let me give some background to this. These regulations have come into place after a lot of dialogue with the stakeholders. Having discussed with them, understanding the requirement, and as you said, we play a facilitative role in ensuring that the industry grows in a healthy manner. So some of the issues that were, bugging the industry, so we try to address that, as well as to ensure that, what we thought in our opinion will improve the development of health insurance in the country. One aspect is the wellness, aspect of insurance has been, features have been brought into the scope of insurance. Because we thought that it is important that for insurance to be sustainable in the long run, the insured population should remain healthy, so that the claims will be manageable and the premiums can be affordable on account of that. The penetration goes up. So having included the wellness features, we expect that the insurers will come out with products which has got these features, which will encourage healthy lifestyles in the insured population, which will benefit the individuals per se as well as the industry in the long run. That was the intent of this. Then we have also brought in a provision for pilot products, which would encourage the insurers to come out with innovative products, and based on how the market accepts it, they will be able to scale it up and launch more or different kinds of products, which will meet the demands of different segments of the insured population. So these are the two main inclusions in the regulation now, in the current regulation, which we believe will help the industry to grow.
And also, I think, have a major impact on the health of the nation. It's partly also a nation-building exercise, as was pointed out by Mr. Srinivasan in the morning address. I mean, we are the hypertension capital, the diabetes capital, the coronary capital of the world, and the road traffic accident capital of the world. And in all of these, the insurance payer actually has a major hit which it takes. So in case these four can be improved, automatically not only is the nation going to improve, but the status of the health insurance sector will improve. Do you believe that one of the reasons why we haven't reached where we should have is a certain amount of trust deficit that the consumer has with the insurer? To a certain extent, is it the problem of underwriting? Is it whatever may be the reason? But there has been over a period of time a trust deficit. As a clinician, I very often found people coming to me that when I got this insurance done, nobody told me that this was not going to be covered. Maybe nobody reads the fine print, but the fact of the matter is that there is ostensibly, or at least in public mind, there is some kind of a fear or a lack of trust in the fact that I'm not going to get my money. Is that a factor? And if so, what can be done to alleviate the feelings that emanate out of this kind of a probably misplaced situation?
This is nothing unique to health insurance, nor unique to India. World over, the credibility of an insurer probably is different from that of another service provider. The point is that, when you buy a product, an insurance product, it's a contract that you're entering to with the insurer. It has got terms and conditions, it has got exclusions, warranties. So most of us fail to appreciate that it is a contract of insurance. So when I suffer a damage or when I suffer a loss, I would expect that, everything is paid for without many questions being asked. So when you say that it is a contract of insurance and it has got terms and conditions in which you should have fulfilled to get that claim, then there's a problem. So what a good insurer does is probably ask a lot of questions upfront at the time of underwriting, so that the insured person understands what he is getting into. So that could be issues with how the product is sold, without explaining all the intricacies, when he can claim, what cannot be paid. So there is a disconnect. So there is a the trust factor, the fact that they have been sold something with a promise to deliver, and then when it comes to the crunch, the delivery doesn't happen. So those kind of issues happen.
So is it a perception issue? Is it a selling issue? Is it an issue which is purely emotional?
See, if you look at the repudiated claims, most of them get repudiated because some condition or the other of the policy is not being followed. There are very few claims which are which we have to review later on and ask an insurer to reconsider. So most of it is because of the lack of understanding of the provisions of the contract. And there is a small section of claims which should have been handled differently. Because when a person comes, he's already in a bad situation, being hospitalized, he's suffering physically, and then if the insurer doesn't respond or the TPA doesn't respond in time, first of all, time. When you go to a hospital, you want a pre-auth immediately. Now, if it takes more time than what is reasonable, then there's a reason for dissatisfaction. And then if he doesn't get all the money which he believes he ought to get, then there is a problem. So, yes, there is an issue of not reacting and responding in time, because that's what a patient would expect, that's what a hospital would expect, so that they can give the care in time. So there is a need to improve the response time. And barring that, when it comes to claims, I said the issue is with lack of understanding of the product, that we need to address it. Maybe it's part of the awareness campaigns, we need to make it clear that it's a contract that you're entering into. It's not a scheme whereby everything is paid. So maybe it'll take some time before the public become aware of this fact.
One other thing that most people are finding difficult, and I think the insurance industry will need to solve this quicker and faster, is the problem that occurs with senior citizens. The lack of insurance for one reason or the other, for insurance that a person at that age may be able to afford, but he's not the ideal candidate for an insurance company to get on board. But as a regulator, you must be having a role in ensuring that the largest section of the volume of the society gets covered. So is true of chronic diseases, many of which are excluded. IRDAi is taking a lot of steps now in mental diseases, and probably mental diseases are going to increase after demonetization. But so how are you going to handle this penetration problem?
This is a major challenge anywhere in the world, I suppose. As you grow old, your medical needs increase, and then the question of affordability. End of the day, insurance is also a commercial activity. They need to make profit. So there is a tendency to ensure that the better risks come into the books. So that's the reason why these wellness programs, etc., and features have been introduced where the insurers can catch them young and keep them by incentivizing them, so that over a period of time, the hospitalization needs are reduced, as well as the cost of premium will be reduced. But then for senior citizens specifically, as a regulator, we take special attention to any issues that crop up from that segment of the population. And the age of entry is kept quite high. Up to the age of 65, I think the insurers have to necessarily insure the population. So there is a certain amount of protection, and we do look at it differently than if there is a grievance from a senior citizen. At least I view it differently from that is coming from another person with a mature age.
I'm going to hold you responsible for this because I'm beyond 65, I'm 70, So next time any insurer refuses my claim, I'm going to come to you. Another issue that I think faces us all is health insurance a product challenge or is it a distribution challenge?
I think both. When you talk of product, I'm also talking in terms of the price of that product. What we have to ensure is that it is available at the right place at the right price, and the terms and conditions should be fair to the consumer, the insured person. So I think it is a question of coming out with products which are more attractive. There are a lot of products that have been approved and probably in the market, but I don't know if all those products are selling in a big way. So I think it is necessary for the insurers to look at the products that they have. And I think the concept of pilot product that we have introduced now should help them to experiment and see which are the products which will sell, which are affordable to and which will meet the needs of the population. Distribution certainly is a challenge. If you look at the penetration, you'll find that it is more so in the urban centers. There is a lot of scope in the small towns and villages, and where there are people who can afford. How do you reach them? How do you make them aware of the need? Or is the challenge the lack of availability of health infrastructure in those locations? In an urban center, there are hospitals. They know that they can get treatment. Therefore, they need to have the kind of funds that are required to have complex, sophisticated treatments. Whereas in smaller towns, probably the infrastructure is not adequate, and therefore, even if there is money with them, they probably will hesitate to buy insurance. Saying, they would rather go to the government hospital where it is available, probably free of cost, or at a much cheaper cost.
That's very well put. If you look at any industry which has grown anywhere in the world, IT being a prime example, and in healthcare is another one, where what drives change, what drives success is innovation. What is the degree of importance that you feel innovation should be given in the insurance sector?
It's an important aspect, because that's the reason why I mentioned in the new regulations, we have kept that in mind and we have allowed them to experiment out with new products. Maybe there is a need for innovation with respect to the distribution as well. We have the traditional, today most of the individual policies are sold through the agent network. And maybe there is another way of doing it. I don't have an answer to it, but I'm sure the insurers are looking at various ways of doing it. One is, as Chairman mentioned, we're going to come out with some guidelines on e-commerce, which will facilitate such transactions, But again, looking at the smaller towns and cities, the connectivity issues, even if you're looking at a digital option, the last mile challenges are there. So insurers alone cannot do it, but then we will probably create that the environment for the insurers to try out new innovative ways of distributing these products and probably break this issue of low penetration.
Now, one of the reasons why I asked you about innovation is yesterday I happened to be sitting at a presentation given by Texas Heart Hospital and the Baylor Institute. And for the first time in my life, and I've spent over 50 years in healthcare, I actually saw a heartless man walk. He doesn't have a heart. His heart has been removed. He just has a small chip here on the chest and a small beating machine where the heart is supposed to be. So if you see the X-ray chest, there is no heart. I know a lot of ladies call men heartless, but I genuinely saw a heartless man's X-ray and a picture of him walking. This is the kind of innovation and research that's happening, and probably tomorrow health insurance will be asked to pay for this kind of a heartless individual being implanted with a heart. But that aside, you have spent your entire professional career in insurance, so you know the ins and outs. What kind of health insurance do you carry?
I think I'll be an insurer's delight. I've got all kinds of insurance. I have a householder's policy. I have my house insured. I have a public liability policy. I have baggage insurance. I don't think many people will have such policies, as part of this. So, apart from what my employer provides for me. So, generally, I don't take much risk if that is a conclusion. I do buy insurance.
Okay. From the perspective of the sheer experience that you have in the insurance industry, I'm sure you have nuggets of knowledge and information to share, particularly with some of the younger professionals who are here. If you were to articulate, say, 3 or 5 of them, what would they be? What should they learn from your career?
I think it will take me a couple of more years to when I can start advising people. But, it has been a wonderful journey for me. I joined the industry at a very young age, and I had the opportunity of working in handling various facets of this business, both in India and abroad. And then maybe I have this unique experience of having to handle general insurance as well as crop insurance, which is very gaining a lot of importance now, and then culminating in the regulators. So it's an industry which is gives a lot of opportunities for youngsters. And I don't think I would have been the same person had I joined some other line of business. The kind of exposure I get in meeting different kind of people. You insure cattle, you insure satellite. You meet with the taxi owners, you meet with the fleet owners and the factory industrialists. So the kind of variety and the kind of exposure we get is fantastic. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to develop themselves, apart from the fact that it's a gainful employment. And as an individual, one develops and meets large cross-section of the society. So that is something which I cherish having worked in this industry.
So the lessons?
Yes, I think...
the lesson is do crop, do health, do general insurance. Yes, what should they move into?
Of course, in this business, specialization is important. There are a lot of people who specialize in particular lines of business, and in India, unfortunately, last 30 years, we have not given much importance to specialization in a particular area of insurance. I think it's time probably some of the youngsters start specializing in a particular line of business.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear, because in virtually any field where development has taken place, it's not just specialization, it's now reached a stage of super specialization and sub-specialization. And I think over a period of time, now for the first time, you're saying that you will be seeing some kind of a development where people who are very good in a particular niche, and that segment will come, do you think, in the
certainly, certainly it will come.
So having reached this stage, and my final question, having reached this stage in your career where you've tasted the fruits of so many of the insurance part, dealt with the public at large, dealt with payers, providers, and everyone, everyone has a feeling in the mind that you want to leave behind some memories or some legacies. What are yours? What do you want to be remembered as once you leave?
I think it's too early. I remember when a film star was given a Lifetime Achievement Award, and then he said, no, it's too early. I have a long way to go. So it's something like this. I think I'll refrain from answering that question. I have a long way to go before I can really talk about having achieved something.
No, not from achieving, but like, for example, you gave this nugget I thought is important, that the insurance industry needs also to have people develop niche areas of specialization. But surely as a legacy of your career, your sojourn over the insurance piece, the changes that have occurred and the factors that have resulted in your growth in your profession do entitle you to be an advisor to the youngsters, at least, from the perspective of what changes, if not your legacy, the legacy that the non-life part of insurance should leave for the nation.
I would like to see that the penetration of insurance grows substantially, and if I'm able to create that framework and facilitate that, and together with the industry, understand their needs and ensure that especially those sections of society which are outside, I'm talking of the lower, the middle class and the lower economic strata who are not able to afford insurance. If I can find a way of ensuring that they come in the insurance net, and as you said, the credibility gap or the trust deficit is reduced, I think that would be my achievement in this role. Thank you.
Mr. Joseph, it's been a pleasure meeting you and wish you all the very best in the rest of your career.
It's a pleasure talking to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. P.J. Joseph from the IRDA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Puri, for conducting that very interesting tete-a-tete. Please give a big round of applause to both of them. Thank you, Mr. Joseph. I think one of the things that rang a bell was, you talked about specialization. We at FICCI are doing some research on, how we are moving towards Industry 4.0 or the fourth industrial revolution, and it's going to impact jobs, in a major way. And many studies have actually said that super specialization, even if you're selling a product, you have to be a specialist in that area to actually sell that product. So I think specialization is a way forward. Thank you so much.